The 8th Annual Africa Public Service Day Conference was held in Zimbabwe earlier this week. The conference was held under the theme, Building the Africa We Want, through embracing an ethical culture that underpins purpose-driven leadership on the context of a crisis. Today, we're talking to Public Service and Administration Minister Senzo Mchunu, looking at the current state of public service in South Africa. Minister, good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight. The conference then, concluding on the 23rd. Talk to us then about some of the priority areas that you shared with your continental counterparts.
Thank you very much, Mazwan, and the viewers of your station. Yes, indeed, we had a very fruitful engagement with our counterparts also in the continent, where we gathered in Victoria Falls for 3 days in a conference that was very informative and very incisive, and indeed quite an opener in a number of areas, but also inspiring in the sense that everybody in the continent in public service seemed to be very concerned about the role that public service is playing against what it should be playing, starting with that imagination of the kind of Africa that we want, which must be shaped to a large extent by the kind of public administrations that we run in our respective countries, and ultimately shaping the whole of the continent. We have Vision 2063 as a continent under the auspices of the AU, and its whole agenda is geared up to that imagination of 2063. There are objectives and goals, but it is ultimately and finally the kind of administration that we dispense out there that will determine whether we get there or we don't get there, and ethics and integrity, and of course a number of other things, including concrete programs, whether we get there or we don't get there. And yes, it was a very interesting conference.
And you talk about something that you've also touched on during your budget vote, that the public service really needs to be improved in some areas. And if I can borrow from what you also decried the state of the low professionalism, low innovation, productivity levels, a low level of skills, and qualifications, and also talking about incompetence and also corruption, where you say that this continues to taint some of those who are really trying to pull their weight. What are some of the mechanisms then that you are going to try and put in place in order to ensure that the public service really becomes what it needs to be, because these are not really new concerns?
Well, firstly is to look at the environment in which public servants do their work, both the elected and those that are appointed. And by and large, a lot of work has been done in terms of making it conducive, but we still have a number of challenges, equipment and so on. But I was quite interested in what the Kenyans are doing, providing for, building a scheme post-retirement. It's something that I thought we could look at. But I also was very much interested in what the Zimbabweans themselves are doing in the environment around realization that in any way public servants do take loans, they become victims of sharks, and crafting a scheme within so that it mitigates against the vulcars of borrowing and taking loans elsewhere. But apart from that, let's then come to work ethic. We shared things like we need to develop merits in our line of recruitment, And that was highly emphasized. And already in the country, we do have a system of recruitment. All we need to do is, one, ensure that there are no loopholes there. In other words, it's not like we use a machine to appoint. We use EAs and panels and all of that. And sitting in public service, I know that there are still weaknesses there. People take their subjectivity and knowledge of someone or loving someone or liking someone against merit. If we are to move with ethics and particularly with the developmental state, but up to the level where in the conference it was emphasized that public service mustn't just exist just to do day-to-day things and so on, and communicating and wearing suits and so on and holding conferences and so on. It must deliver. And the people it must deliver are not the very same public servants that are employed to deliver public service. You are not employed to deliver to yourself. You are employed so that the citizens of the respective countries in the continent, and in this case, our own South Africa, deliver services that are required and are expected of public service, so that public service doesn't exist for its own sake, but it exists to make a difference to the citizens of the country. And therefore, a system of recruitment was emphasized, but secondly, that we need to match public service with not just productivity, but economic growth in particular, because public service that exists outside of productivity, including economic growth, it is doomed to fall at some point or the other. But public service must have an end product, which is economic development. And if public service exists and is practiced in an environment that is characterized in the main by economic development and economic growth, it will flourish. But if you have if your public service, even if efficient, but if economic growth is suppressed and it's not and it's not experienced, it means that your programs and your productivity will naturally run dry at some point, and things will collapse. And therefore, these are the things that of course, we do have a number of in Kenya. There's a school of government. In South Africa, there's a school of government, and these are collaborating. So training is part of my response to what you are asking. But we're not talking about robots. We're talking about human beings in public service, who themselves need to be to have consciousness that they are in public service for a purpose, and therefore they must be inspired by the will to be productive and to be innovative, and therefore the whole of the orientation must be productivity and efficiency, among other things.
And we talk about this at a time where they themselves are really strained, and particularly those in the healthcare sector are really strained, trying to deal with the pandemic and also maintaining their own levels of productivity. Did you touch on that? And how then to ensure that we really try to deal with the levels of fatigue that we're seeing where our healthcare workers are concerned, and also even the exposure that they themselves now have to COVID-19?
Part of why we gathered there was because the 23rd of June is a United Nations declared day to celebrate public service and public servants. And Africa itself as a continent, under the auspices of the AU and its commission and the unit that specializes on education, have set aside this day once in 2 years for all of us to gather and celebrate this. Otherwise, nationally, we celebrate public service every day. We ourselves are thinking of shifting from September to June in consonant with the continent and the world as a whole. But up front this time around, because we're in a crisis of COVID, which is even getting worse, as you know, in our country, we are confronted and under attack from a new variant under a third wave. We are saying the health sector is in focus. The health center is in the spotlight. Now, that includes public servants that are in the health sector. It includes the people of South Africa as a whole, who are recipients of all the services that we intend to offer. And in this instance, the focus is on vaccinations more than any other thing, and even relevant vaccination for that matter. Now, it's not a question of frontline workers in the health sector just doing their normal job in the normal way, but they are operating in a crisis, and therefore I want to say once more in this platform, they are doing an excellent job. They are in the forefront. They are in the where things actually happen, either for a difference or for no difference, and we're encouraging them. All of us as EAs in the country, the Republic of South Africa, and even by experts in this country, by trying to make whatever we can do to make it easy. But there's nothing that can substitute dedication. Nothing will substitute patriotism, loving your country, men and women, and submitting to working beyond the call of duty, as it were. Innovation, I am sure that public servants in the workplace, in their own area, they are they try to innovate every day, because that person who is lying there agonizing because of pain may require to be turned around, may require to be may require medication, may require injection. So those are daily innovations. Of course, on a higher note, or at a higher level, we see that we're trailing behind as a continent and as a country on the map of innovation. And it's time we realize that, so that whenever we're under attack from any pandemic or any crisis, we should rely on ourselves instead of relying on any other country. You see in South Africa, other people are even marching for more vaccines from other countries. But we are saying the emphasis should be put on our own innovation. And post this pandemic, we will have to drive resources towards that, because in a way we've been exposed, the whole of the continent, but we are responding.
Let's continue then our conversation with Minister Senzo Mchunu. Minister, Zolani is asking then that, he says to improve public service, even heads of departments must be professionals and not just politicians. Politicians must not overreach their role and must exercise oversight. This value chain has a great role to play in improving the public service. What do you say to that?
The writer is quite correct. That's why we are now in the process of running a bill which has been supported by Cabinet. It's now at consultation stage towards the end, so that we make a clear red line between EAs, that is executive authority, and accounting officers, so that it is known beyond any doubt who is responsible for what, so that when wrong takes place or occurs, it is known exactly who must be accountable. I must admit, accountability in South Africa is very low. We generalize and we talk in general terms when it comes to real accountability and taking responsibility and consequence management. There are many wrongs that take place, but when it comes to consequences, we are found wanting. But things are turning around. The Auditor General is going to be implementing her own or their own consequence management from this year in terms of the reviewed act, where they will have an option of deciding that you, as the accounting officer, you are accountable and you are responsible for this, and therefore you are charged accordingly and responsible, and you have to bear the consequence. But not apart from that, as I say, we are reviewing the Public Service Act so that we make it clear who is responsible for what. But thirdly, we are also saying, in order to make a clear divide between, to lessen the unnecessary political impact on accounting officers. The school is training accounting officers, National School of Government, but we are emphasizing in the training the need to link DGs and DDGs to professional bodies in the country, so that if you are a DG for health, for instance, you need to subscribe to a number of professional bodies, health bodies in the country. If you are in communication, you do the same. You are a professional in your own right, but you are DG in communications and all other departments, as it were, so that professionalism is put at another level, and we're sure we're taking the right direction. It's a matter of time that we get there. We have even appointed a panel that is hard at work at the moment, a panel that is going to help government to identify weak areas in our framework of professionalizing public service. Of course, the issue of public servants as a high-ranking managers in the country, they would be aware of these and that political issues, like those that have to do with economics, the economic environment in the world, the economic environment in the continent, in different parts of the world, and in the country, and the impact thereof, so that you are able to synergize what decisions government is taking and what practically needs to be done. And that level of consciousness and knowledge, even on patriotism, knowing your own people, what they need and so on, is required. But when you get to the office and you practice your stuff, there must be professionalism, also skillfully executing your job and displaying knowledge and expertise all the time. There's no compromise on that.
And I know that you are finding yourself in a very difficult position right now, especially when you're looking at the negotiations in the public sector that are currently happening. You're seeing unions that are digging in their heels. But I'd like to get your insights here. There's sentiments that were shared by your colleague, Minister Tito Mboweni, and I'd like us to listen to them. And you can then tell us what is your response to that.
Okay.
The fiscal framework, in other words, the overall budget envelope has been set, approved by Parliament. And therefore, whatever we do, we have to operate within that fiscal framework, not outside. You can't operate outside it, because that would be operating outside the law. So therefore, the Minister Senzo Mchunu, the Minister of the Department of Public Service and Administration, is leading the process of negotiations with the trade union movement, which is organized in the public sector. And I hope it's going to be successful. I have to be hopeful. And whatever arrangements they come to, that arrangement cannot be outside the fiscal framework. So that one must be very clear. The fiscal framework is sacrosanct. It can't be changed. And as Minister of Finance, rather, I'm looking back into the past. As Minister of Finance, I have the responsibility to protect the fiscal framework. And this I do all the time. And I face lots of pressures from colleagues all the time. But once the fiscal framework has been adopted by Parliament, that is the basis upon which we proceed. And so whatever agreement Minister Mchunu reaches with the public sector trade unions, that has to fit in within the existing framework, not outside.
Sounds like you don't have much room here. What does this mean for you and the unions?
Let me answer by saying, talking about this, let me start from the specifics to the general. The specific is that we are in the chamber at the moment, that is government and labor in the chamber, under a facilitated process by the facilitator, under the auspices of PSCPC, led by the General Secretary there. And as of today, they were in a session, and they're going to be in a session for another day or two. We're hard at work. We started very far apart. Government was on a particular position, Labour was on a position, and I must say that by today, that gap has been narrowed, but it hasn't been closed, and hence ongoing negotiations, which we must appreciate, because those people negotiating on behalf of Labour, negotiating on behalf of government, face to face, they have it very tough, and it is very hard. But from that, to move outwards, I must say, it is important that leadership of Labour and leadership of government play a constructive and supportive role to those people by providing them with support, whatever support, just support. We need to support them. We need to inspire them to find one another. We need to encourage them, to give courage that they are the hope of the whole of this country under these circumstances, so that they find a solution. Without our support, government and Labour leadership on both sides is going to be quite tough. That we're in a crisis, I mean, everybody knows we're in a crisis. We deny it, we accept it, there's a crisis. But as our theme in Victoria Falls was saying, it has to be leadership in a crisis, but underlined by a character or a culture of integrity, a culture of ethics. But let me come to what my colleague Mboweni was saying. He is saying, here is a road, the speed limit is 120. You don't go beyond 120. Whether you're going from here to Cape Town, that's from Pretoria to Cape Town, or to Durban, or to Messina, or to Nelspruit, or to Soweto, or even here to Atteridgeville. You don't go beyond 120. That is the speed limit. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a law in everything that we're doing. Even when you eat up to a particular limit, no matter how nice food can be, no matter, there are limits everywhere. So he is conscientizing us. He is saying, I'm a traffic cop, and here I am in charge, and the speed limit is 120, and you can drive to and fro, but the speed limit is this, and therefore I agree with you. The situation is very tough. It requires more than just acknowledgement and adherence to the fiscal framework, because you ignore that, you become reckless, you are running your country down, and it's all of us who are going to start coming back to government and say, this government doesn't have any framework. This government doesn't have any direction. This government doesn't know limits. It just does things anyhow. And you will start seeing a lot of imbalance in terms of distribution of resources. We're in a crisis, and therefore you need to apply not just your brain, the top side of your brain, and say, we have to be fair. You are driving delivery on the other hand, but you also have in your hands the lives of people in terms of providing vaccines in an ever-changing situation. Like today, we're told that this variant is very vicious, and this variant is very deadly, and it moves very fast, almost faster than a bullet. And it's not just moving in the air. It is attacking people, and it immediately puts their lives under threat. And it's not just a threat of coughing, it's death. And therefore, government has to balance, government has to be fair, government has to be sensitive and responsive on all those matters. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're saying public servants should not be paid. That's why I say we're hard at work in the chamber. But all of us need to say it's not the chamber and nothing else. We're even saying, yes, it's not delivery. It's not just delivery and nothing else. It's also not coronavirus and nothing else. It is everything at a go. And we happen to be in leadership of the country at this particular moment. It is hard, and we have to think 24/7. And that's why we have to be active and we have to be positive about every one of our problems and our challenges at the moment. And we shouldn't point fingers. The people are very good in pointing fingers and so on. I think if there's any finger at all, it must point to it must be a contributing finger to the problem. Not blaming one another for any reason is not good. We need everybody's active mind at this particular point, and so that we resolve our problems, because these are our problems. These are our problems as South Africans.
Yes.
No matter who started them, wherever they started, whatever their nature, let's resolve the problems first, and then we can talk later.
We're concluding now conversation with Minister Senzo Mchunu. Minister, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'd like to ask you then, tomorrow the President is expected to brief the nation. What are your expectations?
Come again?
The President tomorrow is expected to brief the nation. What are your expectations?
Well, I will be expecting that the President will be addressing the nation, and as usual, and he will be discharging his duties as President of the Republic, and we're ready to hear from him. So
you're not even willing to share with me what might be in there?
Simply because I'm not the President. I haven't had a whisper with him today.
And, Minister, I'm going to ask you just to wear a different hat for me, just for a few minutes, yes.
Yes.
Just be a member of the ANC for me. We just heard from former President Thabo Mbeki. He says that the ANC has done nothing to honor its 2017 conference. And this he was saying at the memorial as he was delivering the lecture on struggle stalwart Walter Sisulu. What do you say to that?
Talking about 2017 campaign.
Yeah, he was talking about the conference. He says you haven't done anything as the ANC to honor those resolutions and to honor those things that you had put in place as part of that particular conference.
Well, I have greatest respect for former President Mbeki and his views, and it's always nice to hear what he has to say as former president. But I will not agree that nothing has happened, nothing has been done in terms of 2017 resolutions. We started implementing them in 2018. Those that belong to internal matters like unity and renewal, a lot of work. We started with the new membership system, for instance, and we've been preaching unity throughout our structures, led by the President of the Republic, up to resolutions that deal with integrity and ethics in the ANC. We are busy implementing now, step aside in terms of the Constitution, but following resolutions that were taken there. broadly speaking, even in the economy and other spheres of life and other aspects of the resolutions, be it on land, be it on education and other aspects. There's a lot that is being. We may not have reached a finality. In other words, we may not have fully implemented some of these resolutions, but certainly we are on our way.
And yesterday we saw the EFF march to SAPRA offices on the issue of vaccines. This is, of course, resonating with quite a number of South Africans who are saying that they need the vaccines and they need to make sure that people are protected from COVID-19. And also then, some concerns were raised around the gathering in and itself yesterday being possibly a super spreader event. But certainly they raised some valid concerns there, concerns around corruption and the fact that, government was talking about trying to ensure that the lockdown is to try and capacitate the country to deal with, this issue of COVID-19. What were your thoughts when you saw the numbers that showed up yesterday and this particular cause that they were fighting for?
I knew that we are not expected to be reckless and hold big gatherings and go around marching and so on. But after today, that is extremely serious. After getting a briefing on this new variant called Delta. Now they gave us lots and lots of details. Now you then think about yesterday when this Delta was already out there. It's putting people at risk straightforward. You're putting them right on top of graves because unless they find a way of being saved in one way or the other, it comes back to this to say it's not about President Ramaphosa, it's not about government of South Africa. It's more about each one of us taking responsibility and responding accordingly. At the moment, we have a deadly disease called COVID-19. It has variants that are deadly and spreading like wildfire. And we have to protect ourselves from this by being responsible, no matter the issue, no matter how angry, no matter what politics and any political party. But we want to say, it defies logic to say I am not going to comply with what President Ramaphosa is going to say. It's not a question of complying or not complying. It's a question of being responsible and therefore in line with your conscience and your understanding of the situation. You do as you are expected. But as for leadership of various political parties and organizations in society and so on, we just have to persuade one another, win each other over to the facts. It's a question of facts. And therefore, we are saying out there, let's avoid all of these gatherings. Let us be responsible. The mask is a matter of mask, but look, it's even better to mask away from gatherings, mask away from marches, mask your life away from a deadly sin. If you are wearing a bulletproof thing for some reason or the other, you don't deliberately put yourself where there's shooting just because you are wearing something called a bulletproof vest. You with your bulletproof vest, you are better off away from a scene of shooting than in being in a scene, let alone staying there for hours and hours. It's a risk. And yourself, it's a risk to other people that you will be going to in the evening after such a match. And there's evidence. I've just been told now there was a gathering somewhere in Drakensberg, and one family member was taking part there and went back, and I'm told even a 3-month-old child in that family got affected. These are realities that we're living in. It's not myth. It's not theory. So let us be responsible. Let us be responsible. No anger.
And
no
Minister,
frustration.
In 20
we just
seconds.
Have to be responsible.
Pardon me. In 20 seconds. 20 seconds. We've run out of time. They do, though, raise some valid concerns around corruption that we've seen on PPEs, around the vaccine rollout program, which really appears to not reaching the desired result. What do you then say to that? Because some of what they said yesterday really made sense.
I agree with them. I agree with them that those who are corrupt must be identified, and we must do this beyond saying government is corrupt, because that's not true. But let us be pointed. If you know somebody is corrupt, go and report cases of corruption with police. If you get an opportunity to talk to a group of people via media and so on, point out those who are corrupt, and they must be dealt with accordingly by law enforcement agencies. No one is embracing corruption in the country. I know everybody now is up in arms against corruption and those who are corrupt, both in the public sector and in the private sector. And by the way, I must say, it takes two to tango. It's not just true that these politicians alone who are corrupt. It is some politicians who may be corrupt and therefore play a role as enablers. We condemn that, but also politicians don't sit in supply chain processes, and those who sit in supply chain supply chain systems and are corrupt, they also must be equally condemned, and we must expose them, and we must act against them. Government is sparing no moment, and via SIU, via police, via all other agencies, and daily these things are being exposed and action is being taken, and that is the right direction. That is the right thing to do. If anything, let us strengthen that move and that direction towards eradicating and elimination corruption. The day we win over corruption, and even amongst us, even your friend and the person you know, once they are corrupt, they are just corrupt, and you part ways, and there's no other way you can do if we are to make South Africa the kind of a country that we want it to be, an ethical and developmental state, and has capacity to do that, and moving up to the continent to do the same. Because corruption stands in the way of better life and movement to the right direction. And therefore it must be condemned, even by yourself. I'm happy you are bringing this to this platform.
All right, Minister, thank you so much for your time. Certainly do appreciate it. I know I kept you longer than I had promised to, but thank you so much for your time tonight. Certainly do appreciate it, Matungwan. That was Public Service and Administration Minister Senzo Mchunu.